So I know my.
Good evening and welcome to tonight's special city council meeting on the topic of the McIntyre. Today, Monday, July 17th, 2023. Val, will you please call the roll?
I will. Mayor McEachern.
Here.
Assistant Mayor Kelly.
Here.
Councilor Tabor.
Here.
Councilor Denton.
Here.
Councilor Moreau.
Here.
Councilor Bagley.
Here.
Councilor Lombardi.
Here.
Councilor Blaylock.
Here.
Councilor Cook.
Here.
All present, Your Honor.
Thank you, Valerie. We're going to hear an update from our legal department. We're going to ask if there's questions from the council at that point. Feel free to direct them to the legal department. Then we're going to have public comment. I'm always trying to get this. Do we have public comment before, after? Always get it wrong, so I'm going to try to do both this time. And then we will have a further discussion, and then we adjourn. And good luck to the Portsmouth Little League players today. It's a warm one, but they're looking good out there. All right. City Attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the update is that, as everyone probably saw, it was published in the Portsmouth Herald, a letter from a lobbying firm called Holland & Knight out of Washington, D.C., had been engaged by Ted Jankowski at a certain point in time, and had offered an opinion that their lobbying firm could potentially successfully lobby the appropriate people to convince the GSA to make a conveyance to the city of the McIntyre property as contemplated by the public law that was passed way back in 2004. Under that law, or Senate Bill 1598, I think, the GSA was sort of mandated to convey that property to the city at the time after all of their federal employees had vacated the building and they had purchased new property and developed a new federal building in Portsmouth. So a lot of those things occurred, but not all of them, and the GSA has been sort of stalwart in their position over the years, despite many efforts by city officials and members, I believe, of our delegation to try to get them to convey that property pursuant to that law. But Holland & Knight believe that they have sufficient contacts within the GSA and within Congress that they could be persuasive in, first of all, convincing the GSA to suspend the auction that is currently ongoing, and then lobby the appropriate people to convince them to convey the property to the city as contemplated under that law. So the latest conversations between City Legal and Holland & Knight led to last week's non-public session with members of Holland & Knight, at which they presented their view, their legal view of how to approach this issue. They highly recommended the lobbying pursuit versus a civil suit, and did not believe there would be a success with a civil suit against GSA, but they do believe that they could be successful in this lobbying effort, and they have put together what's called a scope of work proposal for the city if we were to choose to engage them, at which there would be milestones. So within the first month, obviously, the first order of business would be to see if they can suspend the auction that is currently ongoing in order for them to have time to lobby the appropriate people to see if we could get the conveyance in hand. So tonight the city manager and the city legal department are looking for authority to negotiate the scope of work with Holland & Knight to make this effort on the city's behalf.
Thank you, City Attorney. Any questions for the City Attorney at this time before public comment?
Your Honor.
Councilor Tabor?
The question for the city attorney and the city manager, would these be unbudgeted monies that we would have to have any kind of special appropriation for, or would these be out of budgeted funds?
I can speak to that. We have remaining funds in hand in the McIntyre Design account, and therefore we would not seek appropriation of new funds.
Thanks.
Councilor Marone?
I just, the city attorney mentioned this, but I'd like a little bit more elaboration on the fact that we did specifically request to the GSA to transfer this property based off of this law, and that they replied to us in June, was matter-of-factly basically a no with a lot more words than that. If you could just elaborate a little bit more on that.
Yes, so May 1st, there was a letter sent to Flavio Perez at the General Services Administration by the mayor, requesting that the property be conveyed pursuant to this public law and our interpretation of that law. That was rejected. It was answered by an associate administrator from the GSA. That is very similar to the types of response that occurred all the way back to 2013, 2014, when there is correspondence I've found in our files from the mayor at that time with GSA, attempts by the city attorney at that time to engage a lobbying firm in Maryland. So that, in addition to a number of just general conversations with our GSA representatives from Boston, throughout this process about the conveyance of the property, have all been met with somewhat of a stonewall. No, that's not how we interpret it, because they never built their new federal building. They don't believe all the conditions were met under the law, and therefore they're not obligated to convey the property.
Thank you.
Councilor Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor. I also have a question for legal counsel. Did we ever try to have anyone lobby on our behalf with GSA to acquire the building through this resolution?
Not in this fashion that I'm aware of. I have found a letter inquiring about lobbying back in 2014, but I don't know how far those efforts went.
Any other questions of either city attorney or city manager? I guess one quick question either for the city manager or the city attorney. They stated somewhat, can't pull it up, but to be able to have this is on the scope of work. I'm paraphrasing, and tell me if I'm getting this wrong. But for the economic development purposes the city's planning to use, they would have to have a plan for this building, and that plan, as shared with us, would need to have something other than or have a municipal intent. Is that the correct interpretation of the conversation with Holland Knight and the scope of work?
Yes, their advice is, first of all, to engage the community and get sort of unanimous or a very clear voice that this is what the community wants. And second, to put together a plan to make a municipal use out of this property, that the lobbying efforts would be much more likely to be successful if the property was put to a municipal purpose or for a public benefit, and not with a private developer.
Thank you. Councilor Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor. I actually have a point of clarification. I have questions for the city manager in addition to the legal department. Is now a reasonable time to ask those questions?
Seems like this is a great time.
Okay, perfectly. Perfect. So I am curious about several items that kind of help me make a decision here tonight. The first is, what is our general carrying cost on the building right now for McIntyre?
So for a point of reference, the, in the last fiscal year, the operation and maintenance expense account, that number is $310,637. So I think that answers your question. What is the carrying cost?
That is for 1 year?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Are there any anticipated big-ticket repairs on this building site if the city were continuing to carry it?
Hard to say. Our status has been to maintain it in the state that it's in and essentially keep it in a mothballed state. That's not to say there couldn't be unanticipated expenses that would arise.
Okay. What is the parking revenue currently for a year on this building? And also in addition to that, does that offset currently the carrying cost or not? Is that factored into the carrying cost?
I can tell you, let me back up, the 310,000 number that I stated is to date. And what I can tell you is to date, the entire amount collected in parking revenue is in that same order of magnitude. So suffice to say that the parking revenues are supporting our operation and maintenance of the building.
Okay. And when council received a memo from you in April the 27th, that kind of laid out scenarios for if we acquired the building. And one of those scenarios talked about public housing and that the city had difficulties finding a partner for public housing. Do we anticipate, but part of that scenario was around a $25 million purchase price, should we purchase the building. If we weren't purchasing the building for $25 million, how does that impact finding a partner for a public housing project?
It would certainly change the playing field, so to speak, because so much of the financial challenge and the capital stack involved in successfully coming up with an affordable housing financing model would be to minimize as many costs as possible. So if you were to take away the purchase price, that would make a significant difference.
Okay. And my final question is there any scenario in which the existing federal building becomes affordable housing, or that we're able to fit it up for affordable housing?
That would be an answer for an affordable housing developer to give you. What we've tried to understand and estimate is the cost to renovate the building, but many of those assumptions were based on the estimates we received from Cumming.
Mm-hmm.
So not sure how relevant those would be, so I would defer an answer on that.
Okay. And so that estimate we're talking about is approximately $36 million to renovate the building into City Hall.
26, right?
It was 26 plus $10 million in moving cost, is that correct?
Design cost.
Those were numbers we developed in April. I know that our staff would caution those are very conservative and probably grossly low numbers at this point, but that's,
Okay.
at the point in time, that was what our estimate was, yes.
Thank you so much for answering those questions.
Councilor Bagley?
Yeah, thank you, Your Honor. Just a point of clarification, because I know this comes up a lot. If the city was to acquire the building through this process, the principal McIntyre building, is there any possible way the city could ever take that down, or does that kind of solidify the monument status of the principal building?
So we don't know is the answer. If this property is conveyed to us by GSA, it may or may not come with limitations in the conveyance restrictions as it would have with the monument program. It is an historic monument, so I think it would be between GSA and then our state SHPO office to determine what we could do with the building as part of the conveyance limitations, and we don't know what those would be.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. let us have public comment. Did we grab them? Did we have folks sign up?
No sign up.
No signups. All right. Have at it. Anybody who wants to stand and speak, address, please keep to 3 minutes and state your name and your resident. We ask the Portsmouth residents go first.
First of all, I want to thank the City Council for bringing this issue up and discussing it this evening. This is a fantastic...
Do you mind just name and
Yep,
city
sorry.
residents?
Ted Jankowski, 27 Franklin Street, Portsmouth. This is just an unimaginable opportunity for the city to potentially get this property, get control of it, get ownership, no more partnerships. We're on our own, standing on our own. And this really is, and Councilor Cook brought it up, but it's been discussed a little bit. This is a potentially fantastic opportunity for some type of workforce or affordable housing. What a location. There's a, if you've ever been to Austria, one of the top tourist spots in Austria is a public housing building. It's wonderful. I can't remember the name of the architect, but like tour buses go by it for this reason. You see it, and it's public housing. And it's just beautiful. It's got these plants growing out of the walls and this, wonderful architecture, but it's something, And everybody just, you look at it, you say, I want to live there. And this is an unbelievable potential site for this city and to set an example for the nation of what can be done. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ted.
Sue Polidoro, Middle Street. I just wrote a few notes so I keep on track here. The workforce housing side of it has been mentioned. And in my opinion, this building is not suitable for that just because it has a lot of material in it that will have to be removed. The goal should be, let's get this building to be part of Portsmouth again, and we can do whatever we want with it. It doesn't have to be workforce housing, it doesn't have to be this or that. Once we get it, we can figure out what it is that we want to do with it. I have been following the Blue Ribbon Commission on Archives and History in Portsmouth. And I can tell you just about everybody that is in there, and there's people from all the historical societies in Portsmouth, are having the same issue. They're running out of room. The collections for Portsmouth are all over the place. They have to turn away material that is donated to them because they don't have room. And we don't have a central archive. So my suggestion would be that building is not suitable to be a livable building, someone staying in there and live 24/7. But it's suitable to have other kinds of offices being in there, like Portsmouth Archives. Our history is all over the place. I've done quite a bit of research myself, and it's like, why is it that one of the most historic towns in Portsmouth doesn't have a place a museum that I can go to and see artifacts and see part of the history of Portsmouth? Portsmouth used to be the capital of New Hampshire during the monarchy times. And the items are, unless one of the historical societies decide to have an exhibit, it's usually small. So this is something that I've heard there's a need for, that can be turned into archives, that can be turned into temperature control, so they can keep historical documents. You would not need to do a massive overnight change on anything that has to do with the building. It will benefit the community. It will benefit the Seacoast community as a whole, because right now our artifacts are all being stored in Concord for the most part. So I would like to suggest that. And besides, if we follow this path that Mr. Jankowski had mentioned, we need to be able to explore this. I mean, $30,000, $40,000 in view of what we have spent already in this project, is nothing. We have to have the opportunity to try, and we have to engage our federal delegation to do so, because it is very important. We have uses for that building as is right now. Possession is, I'm almost done. Possession is 9/10 of law. We have had possession of that building now for 4, 5, 6 years. So it is, unofficially ours, but we have to work in making it officially so. So if we can take that suggestion, a benefit that will benefit everybody without having to change one thing or engage with any other kinds of partners, I would like to see that implemented, at least being considered, because why not? Why should not try and get that building to be part of Portsmouth? Thank you.
Thank you, Sue.
Good evening, everybody. Bill Downey, 67 Bow Street. This is a unicorn opportunity. One thing that I've been calling for years is we've been deprived of all options. Let's explore what we have before of us. This is an amazing opportunity. Mayor, your dad and I went down to GSA one day. He asked if I'd drive. I said, you bet. Brought coffee over the house. We talked to GSA. They told us that building could be remediated. I have all of his documents. I'll see if I can pull it out. Just a consideration, but let's explore it. Let's not let the boogeyman, the fear factor, restrain us. Think big, think solid, think strong and confident. Ted, what an amazing feat he just pulled off for us. This is amazing. Let's not botch it up. Now, I'm not sure about the third, and all the rest of it, but that's what lawyers are for. These guys have an office a block away from the White House. Have you seen their website? I've seen nothing like this. I talked to one of the partners last week, and he said, with great confidence, if you can get your delegation, your city management, and your mayor on board, it's more likely than not this would go forward. Now, when have you ever heard of an attorney giving you better than 50-50 odds? That doesn't happen very often. Now, there's great opportunity. I don't see the extended cost. Sure, there's the uptick cost on the attorneys, but to not explore it would be a grave mistake, and history will not look kind on a squandered opportunity. Now, there's many options. We have to go through that. A lot of people are gun shy and worn down. I can appreciate that. I sat here in June 28th for the first meeting. I too have been worn down, but you don't quit on yourself. Let's suck it up. Let's see what options we have before of us and explore it. There's great opportunity here. I said before once, Bryant Park generates $675,000 in pop-up tents between the holidays. They get 175 people at 30 grand. We're not going to get 30 grand. We'll get 5 grand. What an amazing opportunity for more revenue. We're breaking even on the parking as it is. And there's weeds coming out of every crack you can see. So please, let's look at the opportunity. Let's be cautious, but optimistic, and at least explore this opportunity before we rule anything out. Thank you for that consideration.
Thank you, Bill.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. My name is Peter Whalen. I live at 100 Gate Street. I applaud Ted Jankowski for doing this. I think it's a no-brainer. $30,000. You've already spent close to $4 million on the McIntyre. And this is a chance to get this building. Now, a little history lesson here. Our congressional delegation, the $22 million earmark that was supposed to be here in New Hampshire was reallocated to GSA for a building down in the south, in Alabama, I believe. So that money left New Hampshire. GSA took that and it left. I would urge each one of you, and Mayor especially, go to Washington. Get our congressional delegation involved. Where's the photo op in front of the McIntyre? We want to keep this building in Portsmouth. It's our opportunity. Don't squander this opportunity. that $22 million was taken by GSA, was horse traded by our congressional delegation for another building down south. That's what happened to it. If you read the article in the paper, Judd Gregg said, where'd the money go? That's where it went. So GSA owes us something here, and it's time to call the chits in. But I'd urge each one of you, where's the photo op in front of the McIntyre with Senator Shaheen, Hassan, and Chris Pappas? Where are they? We need their help. They should be marching into that building at GSA and get some White House pressure, and we want to get the building for the people of Portsmouth. Push Michael Caine aside. That lawsuit's going to be done. This is an opportunity that we can't squander here in the city of Portsmouth. And for you not to spend the $30,000 to do this with this Washington lobbying firm, I think would be just awful. We have an opportunity, let's go for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, City Council, Jim Lee, 520 Sagamore Avenue. I'd like to bring up a point I haven't heard anybody bring up before. I think the GSA is going to have a tough time selling that building to anybody else because of this law here that says it's supposed to go to Portsmouth. And the reasoning there is that law would constitute what's known in the law as a cloud on the title. I think your attorney and Councilor Moreau was in that business, could speak to that more authoritatively than I. But again, if that's still on the books as a law, it's my belief, based on 40 years as a real estate broker, that that's a cloud on the title, and that would be a real impediment to selling that building to anyone else. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Any other public speakers?
Good evening, Peter Huda, 280 South Street. In listening to the mayor, it's not really clear to me as a resident if we're here to support you to move this forward, or you're asking the public what our opinion is. So I'm going to take number 2. I would be happy to support you moving this forward. I think you owe it to the residents of Portsmouth, since this has come up time and time again, to know either way. It's obvious we have the money, and I'm not really getting a clear picture if the council is mixing prior to what happened here and now as far as developing this. This is a significant opportunity for us, and I would ask you to take this one step at a time before thinking about what we're going to put there and going and starting all that again. Just get the building, or know that the residents need to know if we can get it, or this is just something that somebody else is trying to sell us. This was taken away from us as residents in the 50s. They built the McIntyre. I will not make an opinion on that. And if it is supposed to come back to us according to the law, it was never repealed. Please support this and support the residents of Portsmouth and go for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Petra. Any other speakers? All right, seeing none. Oh.
I could very easily go back and sit down. Page trace 27 Hancock Street. What Mr. Whalen said earlier is the truth. The fact of the matter is that doing what was apparently perceived to be the best for the city of Portsmouth at that moment in time, a senator took money that was earmarked for the McIntyre Building and signed off for the GSA to transfer the money in another deal with another state, with another building that they owned. But the rest of that story, this is sort of like fractured fairy tales, for those of you who are old enough to remember them. The rest of that story is the fact that while we were all sitting up where you are, I remember very distinctly that the firm that you are currently in the middle of litigation with very happily and cheerfully moved with perfect agreement and little resistance all the different companies, federal companies, that were in the McIntyre at the time into his buildings. So the GSA had a choice to build a building out at Pease or something else. And they chose the something else of their own accord. So as to a building not being built out at Pease, GSA chose that route, that path. Now, as to Senator Gregg, thank you very much, sir, wherever you are, for all the work that you did. As he intended the law to read, whether you agree with it or not, yes, I do agree the building's an eyesore. I will finally say, Uncle, I don't find it attractive. But he set this up so that the building would be demolished, and then we go into the 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. But what he set up brilliantly was for the McIntyre to be used for financial purposes. Whatever this firm in Washington is now stating might be the best choice to move it forward, the fact is Senator Gregg set up the legislation for financial rehabilitation of the parcel, which means that despite the fact that the building is now listed as registered with the National Park Service, it could indeed be demolished with a mea culpa. So I am simply going to say, along with past Councilor Whalen, that I think the city deserves one last whack at with the apple, however you want to say it. You need one last try, as much as I'm going to shoot myself for thinking about it. And I'll say to you, it's also summer. So let's think about the cup being half full and not half empty. And here we are, with all due respect, Mayor McEachran, it's time for you to do the voodoo that you do so well. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Paige. I look forward to finding out what that voodoo is. Any other public comment? Okay, I'm going to close the public comment. There was none on Zoom. We will take more questions. First, I'll pass the gavel because I want to say a few words on this, because it's spend a lot of time thinking about this building. And I think the immediate reaction that I heard from most people fell into two camps. Sometimes those folks would have the same, would come to both those same conclusions. One was, man, I'm tired of this. I'm done. I'm tired. And to those people, I got a story. But just, you don't get to be done of necessarily hard things on this council. We didn't sign up for dance class. Like, it's tough, but Portsmouth is a tough place, and we got to do tough things sometimes. So that, I agree that everybody else doesn't have to think about the McIntyre if they don't want to, but it was a voting issue when I ran the first time. It was a voting issue when I ran the second time. I think people in Portsmouth expect me to be able to focus on this. And there's some issues that don't leave. I see Nancy Brown in the audience tonight. She was nice enough to drop off when I first ran a letter that my aunt passed out going door to door, and some of the things back in 1986 that were prevalent was developers having too much control of the city. We need more affordable housing and keeping communities for our residents. And don't know if we're having a different conversation now, and I would like to believe that at some point we can have a different conversation about the McIntyre, but that time I don't believe is yet. The second thing that folks told me was, well, obviously if you could get it for $1, do it. You know, that was pretty universal in that when we had any conversation. Now, I think there's a lot of people simply don't believe that. And we've talked about it for that person right there doesn't believe it. But the issue is, and I'd like, the delegations brought up, past examples have brought up, the letter that I wrote after we had no longer had a pathway through the GSA was simply that your mission need for the building has ended. That had not happened up until this point. That hadn't happened until April, and before it did happen, we were signed up with a development agreement. We couldn't move forward with this. We could not pursue any lobbying or any efforts from the delegation to make it so that they would enforce Senate Law 1498. Just wasn't possible for us to do up until April of this year. It wasn't possible for previous councils in 2013 when they looked and saw an opportunity to do the MPS because the GSA was slow walking us. They never built the building. They never got the feds out. And so the idea that we were going to put some ungodly pressure to move, the FBI and Hoover's organization out of there was just, I think that was untenable at best. So we took the pathway, or the city took the pathway at the time, but a different pathway is available to us now because there's nobody in that building, and we are in possession of that. And I'll say, yes, on the technicalities, a couple of people said that we don't have to have a plan. We do kind of have to have a plan. Nobody's going to go to bat for us in Washington unless we can say, hey, where's a municipal need here? It could be parking, which is carrying the cost. A lot of residents downtown like that parking. It's still kind of a bit of a secret. Nobody knows the second way you can go up. That's usually more parking. That's definitely great. Well, anybody who's watching, I don't know how many tourists are watching the council meetings, but so parking is a need, and we can keep the parking. There's also a need for municipal facilities. We are talking now about a police station. We're talking about a police station that talked about renovating this building. Didn't include what happens if we just move city council down or city hall down to the McIntyre and let them take up the 3rd and 4th floor. That hasn't been on the table yet. And then the post office wing, there's space in the actual federal building for the post office to return its original site, and that could be an easier way, building over the post office for affordable housing, something that, I know that Councilor Denton was talking about the lower Hada City Hall because it was located close to the downtown and can remove the need for cars. That would be a positive, but we do have to come up with a plan. And I think that the question before us right now is $15,000. I bristle at spending any amount of money for taxpayer purposes, but the question that we have even before we discuss whether or not to spend $15,000 for the next 2 months is what we believe the best use of that building. Now, there will be people that say the best use is the private sector developing that. And at a $20 million price tag, I would agree with you. The city is not going to spend $20 million to get into the development business. The risks are too high, and there has to be some sort of return there that we couldn't justify. But at $1, we could start to achieve some of the things that we talk about. We could create affordable housing down there. We could continue the mission and lowering taxpayer burden from the renovation or relocation at the police station. We could continue to have parking there. And for that, I think it's worth it. And if you don't think it's worth it, then that's okay. I understand that. But the thing that most people ask me after talking about the McIntyre is why do we let all these condos happen? Why is that a thing? And that's because private property is a thing. People have the right to do with their property what they will. But we have an opportunity, albeit maybe small, according to some, maybe large, to see whether or not we could acquire this building and this land for things that could benefit all of our residents and not just the residents to come. So I will be supportive of spending the money in order to engage with our outside lobbying firm in order to see whether or not this law is enforceable. And I would hope that I am joined by enough counselors so that we can send a strong message that this is something that we feel as though there is a responsibility to not only investigate but advocate for.
Question for city staff. Have we engaged, I know that there's been discussions with Senator Shaheen's office. Have we engaged since discussing, since receiving this letter from Holland and the firm, with the other delegates, the rest of our delegation from the state?
We have. Previously, we had been primarily talking to Senator Shaheen's office, but at her staff suggestion, we have actively had conversations with both Congressman Pappas and Senator Hassan. They've been being kept up to speed by Senator Shaheen's office, but we are moving forward as a united front, the city with all three.
Thank you.
Councilor Tabor?
Thanks, Mayor. It seems like we should put the issue on the table, so I'm going to propose a motion that we move that staff seek enforcement of the transfer of the McIntyre property to the city at no cost under Senate Bill 1589, and retain appropriate counsel for such purpose so the city can use the property for public use, and that we have a report back on status at the September 18th meeting. If I have a second, I'll elaborate.
Second.
Thanks. Plain and simple, I think this is opportunity. Set aside the return on investment of $30,000 if it gets us a $10 million or $15 million property. We're not in the property business. We're in the business of serving the public. And we've got an extensive capital program for the city, but we're land constrained. And we've got in our future, we've got police stations. We want to create workforce housing, and we have the PHA that's capable of doing that. But that's competing with ball fields. And all of those are competing with parking. And this property for our municipal capital plan could be the missing piece. There's an old saying that they don't make any more land, but a free transfer does something that even God can't do. It gives the city more land for long-term municipal needs, and that could be the federal building. It's an opportunity, but only if we act. Only if we do something tonight, that opportunity goes away. And then in terms of the rest of the parcel, I think we have the opportunity to impact this part of the downtown in a positive way. Councilor Cook said when we voted not to try to buy the McIntyre, it'd be great to do a legacy project, but not for $25 million. Well, what if it's for free? Those of us, the mayor and I, were part of the McIntyre subcommittee, and what we were trying to do was figure out what the public wanted for this parcel and how we could achieve it. One thing we did was we had a survey that was responded to by 3,450 people. We had another 177 take part in deliberations. And their wants and desires were very clear and consistent. And I think that's a very, very valid sample, 20% of the entire city. They wanted McIntyre to give them a gathering place, a place that people would want to go to from all parts of town. And they rejected 4-story buildings right up to the sidewalk on Bow Street and overdevelopment of the site. That would be like the North End. And I don't think anybody would want to go visit the North End when they could go to Market Square. What have we learned from Market Square? When you combine the appropriate scale and the historic streetscape with great public space, you create great value for the long-term future. So I think if we look at the McIntyre property, which is now dead as a doornail, and activate it, using it potentially for municipal use in the building, and then some kind of public gathering space, be it a park, be it indoor gathering space, being it arcades, whatever it is, that works with the scale of that street and keeps the views, and keeps the sunlight, and keeps the views of St. John's. That could be spectacularly good for the community. And we know from Market Square, when you get it right, you create great tax base, great value. Market Square and Congress Street are the highest real estate values in the entire state. So we tried to do that with a development partner through the monument program. It's too hard. The conflict between public benefit and the developer's pro forma was just irreconcilable. But that process is over. We're out of it. And now our question is, do we achieve what the people want through private development or through a credible path, we think it's credible, to take control of the land at no cost? And I think if we're going to really achieve what the citizens have told us they want for this part of town, we should try to get the land. Otherwise, and I respect the other point of view of wash our hands and let the private sector take control, but we have to induce developers to add the public amenities. And once again, the developer's pro forma is going to dictate mass and density. And for those who say maybe we can control this through our land use boards, remember the original Kane proposal was required to do 40% public space. And what we got just didn't have public confidence. So we need to create something that the public feels is theirs. And I think if we work together with this firm and get this site for free, we can do that. I agree with the mayor. Many people say it's too hard, we're fatigued. But for us as a governing body, we don't get to say that. We have to do what's right for the whole city. And not just, and I know there'll be cost, but we don't want to be the council that knows the cost of everything but the value of nothing. We have to look at the long term here. And this is going to be a fight. We're the little guy. But our predecessors wrote this transfer into law, and I think with effective advocacy, we can show that we're in the right. And I say, fight it out. Bring the property back to the city and its people.
Councilor Denton.
Thank you, Your Honor. My first experience with the City Council and the McIntyre was before I was even elected. It was back in 2014. At that time, Mayor Lister and the City Council were understandably frustrated with the process because it had been a decade since the law was signed. At that time, the City Council lobbied the congressional delegation extensively. As I said, it was my first meeting with the City Council. I was Congresswoman Shea Porter's representative. Back then, I was both her outreach director and her Veterans Service Officer, for all intents and purposes. Every member of the congressional delegation had a representative at that table. The GSA had someone at that table, and the frustration from the City Council was palpable back then. And then was the time for this question to try to be answered. What did that legislation intend, not what did it actually say? And the congressional delegation put their full weight on the GSA, and that's what ended up resulting in the Historic Monuments Program. So it's not like this has not been done before. The big change between now and then is it's not necessarily just the residents and the City Council putting pressure directly on the congressional delegation. It would be a third party, a big-time law firm out of D.C., and unlike their responsibility to respond to their constituents or to elected officials, members of Congress don't have any responsibility to respond to a law firm, regardless of how much they charge us and how much we want to see them succeed. The time to have hired a lobbyist to actually figure out what the intent of this legislation said was almost 20 years ago, back in 2004, when then Senator Gregg and then I believe it was acting city manager Ted Chkowski got it to a vote at the Appropriations Committee and moved it forward. That would have been the time to clarify what the intent was, because the past 20 years has left just so much hand-wringing over what was the intent versus what did the legislation actually say. And I wish that the legislation said what the intent said, but it quite frankly didn't, and that's what landed us in the Historic Monuments Program. When pressure on the congressional delegation did not work, because their pressure on the GSA was not enough to surmount what the legislation actually said. And I wish that it was clear what the intent was when the legislation was actually written. Now, since then, since my first time there, in 2016, the City Council made a decision to do a public-private partnership. Former Assistant Mayor Jim Splay and I were the two dissenting views saying, no, let's do just a public investment in this property. Since then, in a half-decade, there have been at least 2 robust discussions with the public to figure out what they want to see this land best used for. If we move forward with this tonight, we're going to have to try to come up with something really quickly to meet what the law firm's asking, what the planned purpose of this property is going to be. And my bigger concern with this isn't putting the money down on the table and not getting the result that we want. My big concern is actually what happens if we're correct and the GSA does indeed hand this property over. I know there's been a lot of talk saying, no, we need to take this opportunity, but there's a chance we could be left with possibly $25 million liability sitting there, because we know it's going to cost significant money to rehabilitate this building itself. And the past meeting, we went forth and bonded $17.5 million worth of capital improvements, things which people have been waiting for some time, whether it be land acquisition for the police station, whether it be sidewalks in Elwyn Park, whether it be pool improvements. If this effort's successful, and if we did get the property, there's going to be a lot of tough decisions that not necessarily this council, but future councils will have to make, saying which ones of these projects are not going to go forward so the city could do something with the McIntyre. So with that said, I'm going to dissent and vote against this motion. Thank you.
Councilor Denton, Councilor Lombardi.
One of the things that I've heard about not wanting to go with this is that the community has been divided over this project. And that's true. It's very true. However, I think that no matter what, whether it goes to a public auction or whether we take control of it, I think that our opportunity to really unify the community is through by having it under control of the city. And I agree with the mayor, and I also agree with Councilor Denton that it's hard, and we can't say, oh, I'm tired of it. It's not our job to say I'm tired of it. We have to keep going. We have to continue, because we will continue whether or not we own it or we don't. And if we don't, I think the fights are going to be a lot harder to get what the city wants than it is if we own it.
Thank you, Councilor Lombardi. Councilor Blaylock.
Thank you, Your Honor. I want to thank Mr. Janikowski for introducing the city to Holland and Knight. I believe they're a very credible firm. And I've listened to all your comments. I've read all your emails. I've listened to some comments on the streets. And I know this isn't our first attempt at acquiring this building. I do think it's important we explore all options, even if we are tired. I think we need to explore this. I do think a lot of similarities are now that have been in the past, but we are in a different situation now than we have been, being that we've been on this 20-year journey, and that is part of the situation we're in. But I think now we're not in a development agreement. We have this very credible law firm willing to work with us. I mean, the cost of $30,000 is not lost on me. I know there's always an opportunity cost. If you're going to work on something, you're not working on something else. But the possible opportunities here for more space, it offers us more opportunities to solve the police station, workforce housing, parking. I mean, right now we saw all the sites listed for the police station. They'll include eliminating something, eliminating a field, or eliminating a parking lot, or eliminating some other aspect of the city that we already use. So it's very clear that we need more space, and this space is very, very valuable. But I do not think we should lose this opportunity to acquire this space. Even though it's the 10th hour, even though it's the 9th inning, I'm still going to go strong and support this.
Councilor Bullock. Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. I promised all my constituents that I would ask all the questions tonight about the cost of the building and make sure that when I'm making a decision, I'm making it based upon reality and what it's going to cost residents. And so that's why I asked so many questions this evening of the city manager. And what I've learned is that our carrying cost is offset by our parking revenues currently. And that's going to be the case now through the end of our lease. So it's currently the case. And if we're asking a firm to work for us for the next few months to see if they can get something accomplished, that is not going to change anything around our carrying cost of the building for the next few months. Now, it is changed if we do acquire the building. The carrying cost doesn't change immediately. We still have parking to offset the cost of maintenance and carrying the building. But if we choose to renovate the building, suddenly we incur a remediation cost. And that was estimated the memo was May 1st memo from the city manager to be around $4 million for remediation. $4 million is not a huge price tag until you start tacking on renovation costs. There is no requirement, though, that the city does anything beyond remediation. In fact, there's no requirement that we actually do the remediation. But if we want to use the building for municipal use, we will have to do it, so around $4 million in remediation. Then if later we decided to redevelop the building, whether that is for City Hall or another use, I would personally love to see a center in the city for nonprofits and artists and an artist use of that building, a public use around archives, or I love that suggestion. I would love to see something like that downtown in our downtown space and a public gallery. But we can make those decisions later. What's invaluable to us is the rest of the land. And the rest of the land where the parking sits, while it's currently offsetting the carrying cost, I would anticipate that we will have to pay for some of those carrying costs later, because I would love to see public housing where our parking lots are, and that's workforce housing. And that's what we need in the city, and there's not a lot of land for workforce housing. We've been doing an analysis around that. So I would love to see workforce housing, even if it costs the city a little bit of money and we have to re-envision what happens with the McIntyre building itself, the current federal building site. So I've been weighing these costs to the city and trying to figure out what makes the most sense for us as a city council. And when I think about the long-term needs for the city, I think about the need for space. I would love to see a project in that space that helps with our housing challenges, that provides city plaza type space for the community, which is what was requested by the community, which allows for the opportunity for a post office return should the federal government decide that they want to do that, and then allows the council in the long term and the city as a whole time to make decisions about what to do with the federal building. So this would allow us that if we can get the building under this resolution. So given the lack of expensive carrying costs at the moment and knowing that those decisions will come down the road, and when those decisions arise, the council that is in place at that time can make those calls, whether or not we want to do a renovation, whether or not we want to relocate City Hall, but that it gives us the opportunity to have housing. I'm going to support this.
And Councilor Cook. Councilor Bagley, then, and Councilor Morrow, and Sister Mayor.
Thank you, Your Honor. From its inception, the McIntyre project was heralded as a beacon of economic revival, job creation, and an augment to our city's charm. However, decades into this venture, we stand at a precipice, continually investing our resources into an endeavor that has yet to yield visible benefits. The millions expended on this undertaking could have been funneled towards addressing the most urgent communal needs. The McIntyre project, in addition to its financial drain, has become a source of division within the community, triggering civic strife. The seemingly endless debate regarding its future has fractured our city, given rise to social tension and disagreement among our citizens. This discord is not the unity we strive for, nor the harmonious ambience we desire for our wonderful city. Moving aside the financial repercussions momentarily, we must contemplate the opportunity cost of this project. This cost, which represents the forfeited benefits and alternative choices when one decision is made, is immense. The resources dedicated to the McIntyre project, including time, effort, and funds, could have been redirected to other beneficial sectors such as infrastructure development, small business assistance, or conservation initiatives. We must ask ourselves, what might we have achieved with these resources? Portsmouth has pressing needs crying for our attention. Our education system and community must bounce back from COVID. Our recreational facilities need enhancement. Our police station calls for modernization, if not a complete rebuilding. Our public services and parks, including Prescott Parks and other existing green spaces, need bolstering and continued upkeep. The cost of the McIntyre project isn't merely the financial outlay, it also represents the potential upgrades to these vital areas that we've foregone. Let us also consider the potential of the property when privately developed. Experts anticipate an increase in the tax revenue of approximately $250,000 per year, a significant financial boon for our city that should not be overlooked. Now, the time is right for a thorough reassessment of our priorities. The measure of a city isn't by ambitious projects, but by its quality education, neighborhoods, public works, and vibrant community spaces. As stewards of Portsmouth's future, we must take a resolute stand and redirect our resources towards sectors that can deliver palpable benefits for all citizens. Indeed, the McIntyre project was conceived with laudable intentions, but current circumstances demand a stringent reconsideration of our commitments. I call upon us today to reflect upon this scenario, examine the facts, and together let's build a Portsmouth that centers the fundamental needs of its citizens, its true asset. In light of these considerations and reading the room, I urge the City Council to disengage from further involvement in this project and vote against it tonight. This is where I should have said reading the room. Should we decide as a council to move forward, I would respectfully ask that we consider engaging on a contingency basis. If the firm is as confident as they claim, they should be acceptable with this stipulation.
Thanks, Councilor Bagley. Assistant Mayor, then Councilor Morrow.
Thank you, Your Honor. I think one of the big takeaways that I have from this is the opportunity. We understand that there's going to be a long-term cost, and we have plans for that. We have a CIP that we would have to roll this into, and we'd have to weigh a lot of things. But I think that the biggest takeaway for me is that we have a chance that we haven't really seen before. I was really encouraged to hear that we had been in contact with the other delegation, the other members of our delegation. And simply put, I think we cannot afford to not try this. We owe it to residents. We owe it to the future of our community, especially when we look at some of the plans that were drawn through looking through the idea of what the McIntyre space could be. Someone who's downtown most often than not, I love the idea of gathering space there. I love the idea of less mass there, and was fully on board with not taking on this project when we had the additional cost of $26 million of potential purchase. When you added that up to a $50, $60, $70 million project, to me, I couldn't justify that cost. But when you look at this as potentially obtaining the spot for free, and then you look at a $26 million, it does feel over the long term an easier pill for us to swallow, for me to swallow. But I think the point I get back to is that I think we can't not try. I know in good faith I can't not try. So for that, I will be supporting this motion as I did second it. And I look forward to working very closely as the council, city staff, and our delegations with hopefully this lobbyist firm to get the correct result. And to, as we all know, there's muscle that needs to be flexed in Washington to sometimes get the right thing done. And so my hope is that we will be able to do this together, and that the community will rally together, because as much as it's been a point of contention, I think it's a point of contention with very few. I think our average citizen trusts their elected officials throughout the last 20 years to continue doing the best thing for them. So that is my opinion on it.
Thank you, Assistant Mayor. Councilor Moreau.
Thank you. I have thought long and hard about this for the last week, and I've had a lot of questions. I've had meetings with staff. And I, until sitting down in this meeting and listening to everyone, had not made up my mind. Knowing that the parking revenues cover the cost of the maintaining the building currently existing, and that can continue until some further point, with the opportunity of knowing that we could possibly put workforce housing there. And I think that's a huge issue, and that could be a real possibility going down the road. Knowing that we have the funds already appointed to be able to spend for the 2 months, and I appreciate the short-term contract of 2 months, because I feel like I've got a short string for this. We need to have, in my mind, there needs to be some real positive movement by the end of the 2 months, or I might not be willing to continue. But at this moment in time, with the 2 months and the covered costs, I'm willing to take another step forward and try to at least see if something can happen that would allow us to have this. And then even if we just park there for several years, I'm okay with that, and we can figure out what happens at that. A municipal use is parking, right? So let's try to figure out what will cost us the least down the road, and let the future councils figure that out. But if we can at least get the property, but I have a 2-month window.
Thank you, Councilor Moreau. I will call for a roll call in a moment. And maybe I should pass the gavel, but I'll be brief. I understand and believe and certainly appreciate the consternation that this project has brought to the city. I think that it is difficult when the city is in an effort to try to figure out how are we going to develop a parcel for not only public benefit but for private gain. I think that's, maybe a lot, maybe too much. I think the fact that we tried to the entire time develop 2.1 acres at once, all together, because no partner would want to leave a piece either undeveloped or unknown what could go there, might have been too much. And so I appreciate that this was not easy up until this point. And I'd like to say, Councilor Denton, you're probably right, 4 years ago or 5 years ago, or whenever it was, 2016, when you voted for a public benefit only and not to go into private development on this. It's incredibly hard. But I am hopeful that this vote sparks the beginning of some unity. I think there's some themes that we all want to see there, and whether or not you vote for it this evening or support plans in the future, I think there's an opportunity for Portsmouth to come behind something, be it affordable housing, be it parking, be it municipal use. But I think there's an opportunity when we take out the private element of this and say, what are we going to do for our city? Because at the heart of it, I think as a kid that grew up going to dances at the Connie Bean, you know, that meant my mom or my dad was driving me down to those dances at the Connie Bean and picking me up. That meant that they were going into the downtown, that they felt that the downtown was a part of their city. And I love all of the things that happen in our downtown. I truly do. My wife would not live here unless we had some of those really fancy restaurants. She loves it, and I love her, and I'm really happy to be here with her. But there is a feeling that, you know, what is it that we are doing for the residents of Portsmouth? And I think that if we had actual municipal activity there, if we had, you know, maintained the parking, if we could put affordable housing, that would show to the city of Portsmouth that we are focused on the residents when we're talking about the downtown. Even when we're talking about downtown, we're still talking about the residents. So I am looking forward to the roll call, but I'm looking forward that if it passes, that we come together and think of a plan that we can all support moving forward. So Val, if you'd be so kind.
Okay. Assistant Mayor Kelly?
Yes.
Councilor Tabor?
Yes.
Councilor Denton?
No.
Councilor Moreau?
Yes.
Councilor Bagley?
No.
Councilor Lombardi?
Yes.
Councilor Blaylock?
Yes.
Councilor Cook?
Yes.
Mayor McEachern?
Yes.
Passes 7-2.
All right. Great. A motion to
Sure.
close the meeting?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Good night, Portsmouth.